Welcome to the third instalment. I think some of you may have been to some of the previous two sessions. So the first one was on digital leadership by Zoe, who's here today again, if you want to give us a wave. And we've also got Jen, who spoke about digital fundraising. Hi, Jen. Jen is here too. And I'm Rebecca Ray Evans. Thanks, Sinead, for the introduction. I'm a service designer, and I'm going to be talking you through service design, digital service delivery for the next hour. Hopefully this session will help you to think about how to rapidly transform services so they work effectively in a remote online environment. Digital services does cover so many things. It could mean anything from simply delivering one-to-one coaching sessions all the way through to something more complex like maybe a system mapping and recommendation service. So during the session, we'd love to hear from you and learn from each other. There will be points when I'm going to ask people to share stories if they feel comfortable. And I think they'll be just as enlightening as anything I'm going to say. So if you're all okay with that, I might pick on you as we go through. If you're not happy to share, that's absolutely fine as well. But I think it would be great to hear from you. So what we're going to be working through are these three basic things. We're going to look at what makes a good digital service. We're going to look at how to design and deliver a good digital experience. And finally, there is going to be some time for questions at the end. So keep those in mind as we go through. It's a lot to get through in an hour. So I've also included lots of links in these slides, usually at the bottom of the slide, that you can follow and you can explore that particular thing we've been talking about further in your own time by looking at those links. So we've been through protocol, so that's great. We can move straight into our icebreaker. So I just want to see who we've got on the call. You've all found the chat function, I think. So if you just want to pop that open, we're going to have a think about one positive, let's start positively. Let's think about one positive change you might have made to your service output. So either a service you've made more digital or something that you've done digitally with a service that already exists. Have a little think about one positive thing. There must be one positive thing you've done. So share who you are, where you're from, and one positive change you've made in the chat, if that's okay. I will give you a couple of minutes to type this and have a read of everyone else's comments just to see who we've got, what sorts of organisations are in the room, and the sorts of services you're all working on. So I'll give you a moment to type that into the chat box. If anyone's having any trouble with that, raise your hand and we'll help you out. WhatsApp support groups, it's interesting. We've got some digital storytelling as well. Right, we've got some funding campaigns being launched. Good to hear, all positive. Some patient support groups, right? Well, we've had quite a few comments there, so feel free to keep reading through those and pop in some comments in there. I won't pick on anyone for this one. It's just a icebreaker to get you all used to the chat session. Why digitize a service? We normally talk about things like how digital can quickly reach more people. especially those who might struggle to get to a physical location. And we talk about how it might make people more efficient at their jobs and maybe increasing capacity. We also talk about how it can scale your impact and scale the work that you're doing. But actually, what we've found is that the coronavirus happened. So I don't need to spend as much time convincing people that digital services are important as I used to spend on that. I think lots of people are becoming very digital quite quickly. I think we'll see long-term effects here, where we need to bring staff and culture maybe up to the same speed as our very rapidly transformed services. I don't know if anybody's seeing that they're maybe feeling that they're moving quite quickly, and need to maybe think about what their next steps are on that. So I really like this tweet that has been going around. Who led the digital transformation of your company? In a lot of cases, it is COVID-19. It's something that I've been working on for a long time, trying to convince people to become more digital. And all of a sudden, overnight, it's happened for a lot of people much more quickly than maybe they expected to. I'm seeing not a lot of nods on the videos there, so it's something that is quite expected of people. So what I just want to ask you all is to have a think about the future. So you've all talked now, and I'm seeing more services coming up here. So we've got things like Facebook, using Facebook Live, using Instagram TV as part of our service delivery. And these are new things to a lot of us in a lot of cases. And COVID may have meant that we've transformed those services more quickly than we liked. So I suppose we are at a point now, coronavirus is different in every country. We're all at different stages of dealing with that, but we are going to have to think about the future of our services and our organisation. So I'm really curious to hear from you all about what that looks like. What does the future look like? So you've made some digital changes. You might have already been quite far along in your digital service journey, but what are you going to do next? Are you going to move back to where you were before, or are you going to keep all or some of those changes that you've made? I really want to hear what new challenges might be for you, where your focus is going to be. I'll let you have a think. So you're talking about things like virtual meetings with your donors. Is this something that you're going to keep doing post-COVID, or are you going to revert back, or is it going to be somewhere in the middle? So again, I'll let you just have a little think about that, and if you can type it in the chat, that would be brilliant. Interesting to hear. You're going to have some challenges to keep working on convincing people of the benefits. At CIMA, is that CIMA? Alejandra, do you want to share a little bit with the group? Yeah, that'd be great.
Hi, I'm Alejandra. What I meant, I'm sorry, I'm going to turn the video on just to say hi. What I meant is, I come from Mexico. The foundation is in Mexico, and there are still some reticences from the people, from the companies that sponsor the foundation to go digital, let's say, on signing contracts, for example. In a city like Mexico City, sometimes we do spend a lot of time and lose a lot of time just sending someone with 3 copies of contracts to be signed physically so that they can be returned, but then 1 copy has to go to another place. And this is the thing we're working now on, because there's really some companies that still want to have those 3 copies, you know, the envelope with the 3 copies of the documents. And, you know, we have lots of collaborations, especially in October, the breast cancer awareness month. And we literally go crazy, and we would love to go to the e-sign program, but there's still not really that much acceptance in a country like mine. That's what I meant.
That is interesting. Obviously, digital transformation includes a lot of people, so you're having to bring them along with you, aren't you? Yeah, really challenged. Have you had any success in convincing anyone yet?
No, not yet. We're still working on it, and we are preparing now some documents, and we're always talking about the possibility of going, you know, digital with that. But no, we still haven't convinced anybody, but we hope we will do soon.
Brilliant. Fatima, do you mind if I pick on you? I'm just interested to hear that you are going to go keep 50% digital, but you are going to go back to some face-to-face as well for counselling sessions.
Yes, because we get feedback from our child patients that they really want to see us face to face and really have that personal connection. So we're trying our best to do digital games and all that, but it's different, you know, especially when they have to go for procedures. They still want us to hold their hand. They still want us to hug them and all that. So I think it really still has to be that connection, that physical connection, when there's already a vaccine for COVID. Thank you.
I think that's an absolutely brilliant point. We, although I work predominantly in the digital field, not everything is going to be perfect for digital, and we do need to consider how face-to-face works alongside digital as well. So interested to hear that you're going to keep some of the digital aspects, but definitely move back face-to-face as well. Great. There's keep reading through the comments. There's been some really interesting things coming through there. You will get the transcript of the comments as well. So you'll get to have a look at that in more detail. So the first step to a good service, good service design, is admitting you have a bad service in the first place. It can be really difficult to admit this. Like any design, we all get quite attached to our own creation. So it really is an important first step. We have to detach, we have to take feedback if we want to improve that. But I have a few questions for you. You can just put your hands up like this if you like. Does anyone have an internal IT department? And who hates calling them to ask them for help with something? And this is not me bashing an IT department. It's just, you know, it can be kind of challenging sometimes. How about, have you ever tried to book a flight online? How much do you hate all of the extra charges, the millions of steps you have to go through, the hidden tax that just appears at the end of the situation? There's so many services we all dread to use. There's probably loads more that you can think about. So hopefully it helps you to know that a lot of services are bad. We're not all trained service designers, and it happens quite a lot. So I hope we're all now at a point where we might agree that we potentially have a bad service. We've all talked about the positives that we've experienced. We've talked about the future, and overwhelmingly you all want to keep some of the digital transformation that you've made over the COVID-19, but there must be also a negative, otherwise you wouldn't be here learning more about service design. So I do just want us all to now have a think about a service that your organization provides that can be improved. So maybe think of a digital service that you've already got that you'd like to improve on, or one that you'd like to improve on by making it digital. It might currently be offline, or even a new service that you think that you should provide that you don't currently provide. Just have a think about that. Feel free to pop it in the chat. Don't worry about describing the problem in too much detail. We're going to go into that as we go through the session. I just want you to have a think of something so you can keep it in mind as we go through these few points, so you can start to have a think about how that might be improved with some of the tips that I've got for you. So have a think. if you want to share your bad service, feel free to. This is a safe space to share those bad services that you want to improve. And I'll just give you a few moments for that. While you're all sharing that, I've noticed a few people have joined, so don't worry, you've not missed too much. We're just having to think about a service that we might want to improve, a digital service, or an offline service that we might want to move to offline. So we're just having to think about that. So welcome if you're new, and we're just popping that in the chat if we feel comfortable to share it, just so we can get an idea of the sorts of services we might be working on. And we're starting to see some come through. So we've got some around financial operations, so kind of internal processes that need moving to digital platforms. We've got about providing care to patients, so thinking about treatment services. And obviously fundraising is going to come up for everybody, I suppose. So some of our patients are financially challenged, you're right in here, so you want to improve on that. So thank you for sharing those. I'll let you carry on sharing and reading those that are coming through, and keep that in your mind as we move through the next stage, because we're moving on to what actually makes a good service. So I'm going to talk through some quick things to look out for. I'll be asking if any of these principles that I go through resonate as something that you'd like to improve about this particular service as we go through, so keep that in mind. One trap I always see people fall into is obsessing over the tool. Digital service design is not a procurement exercise. Spending 80% of our time figuring out the best CRM, the best education software, or the best application portal, and then only spending 20% of our time figuring out the audience needs is probably the wrong way around. No software is going to be perfect, and sometimes a really low-key digital approach is better. You'll know this if you've tried to procure. CRM is a great example here. So if you think of customer relationship management tools, if any of you have that and have tried to procure that, you won't have found one that's perfect and does everything you want. Yeah, getting some nods. It's so none of them are perfect, and we can spend all day banging our heads against a wall trying to figure out the best piece of software for a situation, and it's not going to ever be perfect. So I think sometimes worrying about this too much isn't overly helpful. Really, we should be spending our time thinking about audience needs and the service itself. We might even have to rethink this software if needs change in a year's time, in 2 years' time. So spending weeks and weeks worrying about picking the right tool and then needing to change it in a year's time, it's going to make it more difficult for us to make that change after committing so hard to one tool. We do need to choose the right tool. I'm not completely dismissing software and tools out of hand, but it's definitely not the key to good service design. So I'm just going to introduce you to Lou Down's Good Service Design book. Lou Down is Director of Design for Land Planning in the UK government. It sounds very boring, but previously was the Director of UK Gov, and has made this list of 15 principles of good service design. They're outlined on the linked website I've put on this page, and are also obviously in more detail in the book. I think if you want to have a quick scan through these 15 principles, it's quite self-explanatory from the headings what they mean. So you're probably already reading through this and having a bit of a think about that service that you outlined earlier, the one that you might want to improve on. So does your service comply with these principles? I think it's good to have a quick scan of these and have a think. I won't go through every single one in detail, but I think they are a really good starting point. I am going to dig into these principles a little bit more. And the first place I'm going to start is a question that everybody asks me, and it's linked to, this is the wrong slide. Oh. My audience slide has disappeared for some reason, but it's fine. Audience, but getting back on track, so it's the wrong slide. This is why tech, don't spend too long relying on technology. This is what I'm saying, because this happens. Audience not online. So this is linked to the first principle. So if I go back to that, is it easy to find? Is it easy to use? There are a lot of audiences that aren't online, and it's almost the first thing people ask me when they're designing a service is usually, what tool should I use? And then the second thing they say to me is, well, a lot of my audience isn't online. They might be an older audience, for example, and they're making the assumption that they aren't. So the first thing I usually ask them is, are you sure they aren't online? And then the second thing, if they definitely aren't online, the question is, should they be online using digital services? And what I mean by that is, will it help them live their life better if they did have access to digital services? And then the question is, can you help them get online? You might start thinking, well, maybe that's not my job. But if they need access to your service and they currently can't get access to your service, maybe it does become your job. So there are other organizations that are very adept at getting people used to using digital services. So there's probably one that you can think of, that you know of now. Can you work with them to start helping your audience get online? There are a lot of digital buddy schemes that have cropped up during COVID-19 as well. And I think a big positive of COVID-19 hasn't just been upskilling charities in digital, it has also been upskilling the general public in digital. So there's been a lot of work to get people who previously weren't online into a situation where they're more comfortable with using digital services. The final point I'd make about getting people online is, do they need access to your service right now? So maybe you're thinking, oh, I don't think digital is going to give them much benefit beyond what we do, but how important is it what you do to them needing to get access to your service? This isn't something that we're going to need to think about particularly long term, but right now, if there is a crisis point where they can't access it, is it going to be really important for them to access it? So maybe you have to think, and we talked about this earlier, maybe you want to, Fatima, great example leading into this, maybe you do want to keep some of that service offline, and there's an offline way to reach them as well as having an online one. So, you know, it does sound like it's making more work for you, and it is. You're going to have kind of two services running parallel in different ways, but if that person really needs access to your service, this is what we're going to have to do. So the second thing I just wanted to pick up on from that list of principles was, Lou talks about behaviours. She talks about creating positive behaviours, and that means don't set a precedent for behaviours that are harmful to users. So a really great example of this is data that we use. So we obviously mustn't encourage users to give more data than they need to. And we mean this, it needs to kind of sit alongside the entire service as a principle that we think about. How are we creating behaviours that are harmful to users? And this can be a difficult question to answer sometimes, especially when we think about digital, because there's a lot we don't know about digital and how digital services can be harmful to users. But I think having a think about that up front before we design a service is incredibly important. And it might not be that you're misusing their data, of course you aren't, but other people might be. So getting people used to and in a behaviour set where they just agree to give away any data, it might be fine to give it to you, but it might not be fine to give it to somebody else. So we can't normalise that kind of behaviour. Creating dependence on a service is also not a great idea. We want people to gain self-efficiency from a service if they can. And there are many ways we can design a service to do this. There are also many digital ways we can design a service to be dependent on a service. We also need to think about staff. We think about our audience and our users. Staff is another audience that we have when we design a service. So staff, it might mean that we're incentivizing them to give a bad service. For example, short call handling time targets. And this is potentially why we hate calling up our IT service, or we hate calling up somewhere to book a flight, because they're trying to get us in and out of that call as quickly as possible. So that's incentivizing, potentially incentivizing a bad service. So thinking about encouraging right behaviors over wrong behaviors is incredibly important. And I also want to bring up behavior change and behavior science into this. I feel that most services I work on are in some way entangled with behavior change. For example, we might want people to take a daily pill. On the surface, we can assume that a pill-taking reminder app might help people to take that pill. However, I don't know if anybody's worked in research on this, you might have done. We know that sometimes other things play a part here. In this particular example, some people don't believe that the pill really works. So they're not forgetting to take the app, they actively aren't taking the pill because they don't think it's important. So in this instance, creating a pill-taking reminder app wouldn't actually help. The better service solution is one that tackles this issue and ensures that people trust the pill is the right thing for them. So it's a completely different product and service that we're designing for them there. And we really need to think about that behavior from the start. The Good Help report is linked to on this page, and it explores some of these things we want to think about and incorporate into a service design to make it achieve the impact that we want to make. Another thing that might help us is measuring our outcomes and measuring them well, but finally actually measuring them in a way that we will actually use them to make change, you know, rather than it sitting in a drawer somewhere gathering dust. I know that happens to many people. People love a report just to pop it in a drawer. We need to make sure that that measurement actually makes change, rather than something that we just show funders or trustees. And I think the key here is to remember that a bad outcome is okay. It's fine if our measurement says that it's not working, because that means we can change it. It's absolutely normal to get these kind of results from measurement. Something else I just wanted to pick up on, which again is probably the third thing I ever get asked with creating services, is safeguarding and privacy. A lot of us have rightly been concerned about it, especially during the quick turnaround with COVID-19. But the short answer to safeguarding and privacy is don't overthink it. It's good that we err on the side of caution, but the normal safeguarding rules apply in digital just as they do offline. So think about why you're collecting data, check what your tools are doing, think about how digital changes things, and learn from others who are already doing the same thing you are. So a great story I heard about this was that Barnardo's was supporting trafficked children by providing face-to-face catch-up sessions. That sounded like a really easy digital transformation, right? You just use Zoom. That's what we'd all expect. These children did have access to devices on the whole, so an assumption about them not having devices was incorrect. They did have devices. So Zoom face-to-face sessions, easy. However, there were things that they hadn't thought about. So for example, face-to-face, they could make sure that the environment that they were in was safe. On a Zoom call, anybody could be behind the screen. So they ended up using code words, which is a really quick fix to that. But I think the key there is knowing that that would be an issue beforehand, or finding out very quickly as they launched. A really good example of safeguarding there. Again, I've put some resources below. I do know this is something that people are concerned about, and rightly so. So have a look at those resources if you do want to know a little bit more about safeguarding and privacy. Just to end this section, Lou has helpfully created a free checklist, so you can download it from this link and see how your service is working against these principles. So have a look at that. It's a really great tool to quickly assess things. So that's enough of me for a little bit. I want to just go back over to you. So that service that you identified earlier as one that you'd like to work on or improve on, or a new one that you'd like to launch, have a think about what principle that I've talked about, one of the things that I've talked about, or something completely different. What might be a focus for the improvement? What is it about that service that you need to improve on? So if you don't mind sharing a little bit about that service in the chat, telling us what it is that might be a focus for improvement. Is it that you want to really make your audience focused? You want to have a look at how people find the service? Is there anything that I've talked about that has rang a bell for you? Again, I'll give you a few minutes to have a think about that and share it in the chat box, and I will probably pick on a few of you to share your stories if that's okay. So over to you. I'll let you have a think.
Rebecca, it might be worth putting up the list of 15 again.
Yes, good point.
It might be helpful for people to have a look at. There we go.
Okay, some really interesting, I don't know if everybody's had a chance to type an answer to this, the new question, what it is that you might improve, but I'm going to pick on a few of you from the previous question if that's okay. So Cara, you've been talking about starting an online shop. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Hi everyone. So we're the Cancer Association of South Africa, and I think a lot of us know that we have certain promotional products that help us with income, as well as items for patients such as your meal replacements and nappies, stoma products we do as well. And we are finding that a lot of patients are obviously just not coming through to the offices anymore due to the challenges and are more limited at home. And a lot of our other partners that are even doing, for example, specialist hats for cancer patients to keep the scalp warm, etc., are really booming online. And they're getting a lot of orders, and people are happy to order things online to come to the comfort of their own home. So you can go and get, for example, a promotional item from cancer, as well as your nappies, your stoma products, and whatever you'd like, basically are available, and meal replacement delivered to your door. So that's kind of the thinking, especially right now, because people just don't want to move around, and we respect that. So at the same time, we're going to make it easier for them, but also then not lose income, which is a challenge for us. So, yeah.
Thank you. anyone else want to share? Kajat, sorry if I've got your name wrong, but you've got a few potential challenges here that are quite interesting. So yeah, cost of data, fluctuations in internet services and education. Do you want to share a little about that? Oh, I think you're on mute. Who would do something like that?
Well, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Good afternoon, good day. I'm Khadija from Nigeria. In Nigeria, the cost of, in as much as the new normal is what we are practicing, cost of data is quite high here. Again, even when you can afford to pay for the data, will be faced with fluctuation in internet services is quite bad. That's another potential challenge. Then even some of our support group members, cancer patients, the education awareness in navigating and using the internet services is a little bit poor. So those are probably the areas we'll be looking.
Oh, I think we've lost you there. Which showcases the data access might be a challenge. Oh, if you come back, I'll go back to you. Oh, no, yeah. Is it happening?
Did you hear?
Yeah, we can hear you again now. Sorry, you cut out there.
Oh, sorry. I was lost.
Yes, you were. Do you want to carry on? No, okay. We'll have to give up on that. But if you want to share in the chat when you're back, I'm sure we'd like to hear more about that. I certainly would. I think getting people online is a big challenge that we're all having at the minute. So really keen to hear how you've managed with that. If you can share. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the last section. Actually, how do you make a good service? So we know what makes a good service now. We've heard from some of the challenges that we're all getting through over the last few months. But what is it that makes a good service? So I'm just going to share some of the key things here. So the audience needs to be front and center when we design a service. Everybody says this, right? It's nothing new to anybody in this room, probably. We all know we need to put the audience central, but it's harder than it sounds. We all use assumptions and we use bias. We all have our own biases and we use them every single day to get through the day. It's a natural human trait to have them. I think we all just need to be conscious when we're designing that our own bias could be used when we create a service. There are loads of ways to overcome this. There's loads of ways to research with our audience. It doesn't have to take a long time either. Literally just talking to your audience at any possible chances you get is a great starting point. But a really good way to overcome it is to test your service or other people's services and products if you can. If you just need to get a baseline, test them with your users to understand their expectations, to understand their experiences. By watching somebody use a product or service, having a quick test of it is a much better way of understanding their behavior than even an interview. And I do love a good interview or a focus group, and it's quite a quick way to do it as well. So plenty of ways to connect with your audience, to research with them. There's a lot of talk at the minute about co-design and co-participation and participatory design, whatever we want to call it. But really all that means is just making sure that the people that we're designing for are involved in the creation of that design and that service. The next thing we want to think about is iteration. And again, this is something that everyone here has probably heard about quite a lot. And I do think it is the key to any great digital whatsoever, whether it's a service or something else completely. The ability to iterate and change over time is so important. This is going to allow you to stay relevant. It's going to help you provide the right service for your audience's changing needs. It's also going to help you keep on top of any digital changes. We all know that digital is a fast moving world. We're now designing for voice commands and bots. Who was it in the chat earlier that said they were working on a VR product? Who would have thought we were working on VR services a year ago, 2 to 3 years ago? None of this would have been imagined as standard service design. Even before then, you might have thought about gesture-based touch screens. That's a completely new digital behavior that we need to design for. And of course, mobile. Everybody's using mobile devices now rather than desktop, which for somebody working in the product design industry, that's a massive change for what you have to design. Although we say that, we need to keep iterating and keeping up. There are a lot of us who still haven't caught up with that mobile touch point, which is something that we were looking at a couple of years ago. So unfortunately, digital isn't just something that we can purchase and ignore. It's like a car. It's going to need petrol. It's going to need a service, and eventually you're going to want a whole new car when it stops working completely. Or you might even want a new car just because it's a bit nicer than what you have now. So I do like to think about digital as being like a car. It's also going to help you when you want to start to transform a current service. If you think about iteration, you can start with something quite small, or you can start with a minimum viable product. You don't need to think about the entire service at once if you can't or you don't have that capacity. Just think of a piece of the puzzle and transform it and see how it works and test it and iterate on it and build on it. It can be quite daunting when you think about transforming an entire organization digitally. It's more manageable if we just pick one thing and start there. I think the key thing about iteration is it's a culture change more than anything else. You need to develop a culture of iteration, and it's something that needs developing within your organization. It's really easy to say that, but obviously we all know culture change is quite difficult to implement. People do not enjoy change on the whole. I know I worked for a hot desking company and absolutely hated moving desks every day. I really wanted to have my own desk. People just generally don't tend to enjoy change. So it really is about having that culture that change is okay, change is normal. It's something that we're going to be working on over time. We can consider having roles, people who manage this. We talk about product owners a little bit, and that's kind of helpful in the service industry as well, having someone to own that service and make it their job to make sure that that service is always up to speed, and also to bring people on board with it. Which links to my next slide, which is about buy-in. I think it's almost like a bit of a dirty word, buy-in. It feels like you're just getting people on board for the sake of getting people on board, but ultimately it's absolutely completely important to everything that we do. Another big thing that I face when I'm digitizing services, I do nod away if you have this, is that frontline staff can sometimes feel like you're doing them out of a job somehow, and that digital is going to take over. You know, the robots are taking all our jobs is certainly something I hear quite a lot from frontline service staff. It's maybe something that's been not as forefront when we think of COVID-19, because I think everybody's on board understanding that we do need to go digital, but it's something that is a danger if we don't do it right, and we need to kind of navigate that. They are one of our audience groups. We cannot develop a service in isolation from them. They know the audience needs, they know their own challenges. We should be designing with them rather than for them. And they should be involved in the entire design process when you're creating a digital tool, a digital service. I said tool because the next slide is about tools. So I know earlier I said that tools don't matter. Remember when I said service design is not a procurement process? But choosing the right tool can be a big part of the job for service design. So there are 3 things to think about. The first one, the easiest way for your service users to access your service is probably a really good place to start. So will they have to download something new to access your service, which can be a barrier? If you're creating an app, that's something completely new they have to download onto their phone. Is that the best way to deliver that service to them? Do you need to keep it in the browser, just a link and they can open it, no downloads needed? Do they use WhatsApp? Is that somewhere where they're likely to interact with you? Somebody earlier did talk about working on WhatsApp products. Do they refuse to use Facebook because of security concerns? That's something that I found with particular sets of service users. And it's all worthwhile thinking about, but also keeping in mind what I was talking about earlier, that no one platform is going to be perfect for everyone. Sometimes it might mean that we have to run our service on multiple platforms. Sometimes it means onboarding a certain group of people. So yes, maybe you decide that an app is the best way to go based on what you want to deliver. but maybe that might be a barrier to a certain group of people accessing your service. So maybe there's something you can do around onboarding people into that app and helping them use that app. Another way to think about tools is to write a list of requirements, especially when you're thinking about a bigger piece of software. That's going to help you choose you can use those requirements and match it against what they provide. Again, it's unlikely that one will be perfect, and that process can take a lot of time, but it is kind of a robust way to choose a platform. But the final option, and this is the cheat option, and it's also probably the easiest and best option, is to have a look at what other organizations are doing. If they're delivering a similar service to you, they might have done the testing for you. They might have tried out 4 or 5 different products that didn't work for them and settled on this one. So you can quite quickly, if you can develop a relationship with them, ask them what they've used. If you can find case studies, I think that that's a really good way to have a shortcut to make a decision on a tool. There are a list of common tools here that you can have a look at. There's a link earlier that'll help you make a decision. So I think we've got quite a lot of case studies from you today and heard from some of you, and it's been a really good experience. If anyone wants to share some final case studies, particularly thinking about what the user need was, what was the service you've created and how did you create it? So again, going back to the positive, I do like to end on a positive. We started on a positive, we talked about bad stuff in the middle, and now let's end on a positive. If anybody really has something that they've done, and I will go back through the chat as well to see if there's anyone who can share a story, or if anybody really wants to share a story now, feel free to pop your hand up digitally or physically, and I'll have a look at your videos to see if anybody's doing that. And it would be great to have 1 or 2 more stories shared in the end to hear from your case studies. Feel free to pop it in the chat or raise your hand if you want to share a case study. I remember someone earlier was talking about physical fundraisers. I think that might be quite interesting to hear from. Who might that be? And Jen, I don't know if you've seen anything, or Zoe, anything you've seen in the comments that people might want to pick on, or Sinead?
I think there's a very interesting comment here about people resisting digital transformation. Dr. Hadi, are you able to say a bit more about that?
So Abed here from Lahore Shah Khan Hospital over here. We are a charity-based hospital. 3 months back, the first case of COVID-19 reported over here. And since then, we started to conduct online Facebook sessions to aware the general public about this disease. And since then, we are also conducting online medical webinars for the doctors and paramedical staff. The biggest challenge was that we are a charity-based hospital, and we are providing free cancer care to 75% of our patients. So in order to continue with the cancer care, which is our primary mission, we shifted all our efforts on digital. Like we started telemedicine clinics, and also we taking appointments online. We already were taking appointments online of the patients. So we tried our best that as physically all the patients couldn't come over here. So we also introduced the diagnostic home collection services. Like we offered home collection testing services for our patients who couldn't join us here. So still we are learning from the circumstances and adapting every day with regards to our services. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And were there particular aspects around the people resisting digital transformation? Because I think that's what your original question was about.
Regarding the digital transformation resistance, this is something I'm not talking about the beneficiary. I'm not talking about the public, the people living with cancer, or let's say healthcare professional, our target audience that we work with. What I'm saying is the actual team you are working with. This is something. It's a challenge. You get people are not comfortable with digital transformation, no matter what you. And if you go back, Rebecca, to the previous slide. If you back your previous slide, what they need. So, not the buy-in. You go how to choose the next slide. So next slide. So what was the user need? So that's one of the things when you are meeting, want to transfer a service to digital service. You meet with people, you want to ask them what they need. And then the moment, this is psychology, we have to be aware of this. They are, and that's why the change transformation skills is very important. So you talk to them and they just start to kind of afraid of digital transformation. And then they just make their need is so complex. And no matter what you show them of the solution or offer them, they just take you back and forth. They get you in a, how can I say, in a loop that you don't get out of it, just because they are not comfortable or resistant for the change. So that's something an organizational level change, when we're working at that change transformation at the organization level. This is something we have to consider as a main point in designing digital service. That point should be taken care of, and we need to identify, are we dealing here with a case of resistance, or it's actually very complex need that we cannot switch it to digital service. Thank you.
Thank you. Really great point. Absolutely. I think a lot of service design is actually change management and culture, reworking culture to make sure that everybody is comfortable with that kind of thing. But absolutely identifying whether it is a culture issue or something that is never going to be transformed to digital because of the nature of the challenge. Really good point. Alejandra, do you want to share what you have just shared about thinking about a new program that you're going to look at?
Yes, well, we were thinking about going to the 2020 version of one of our newest programs. We only launched it last year, and it's a program. It's a very vast program. It has lots of different activities, and it involves also a lot of people. So we were really trying to decide whether it was a good idea to go ahead and do it this year. We were kind of leaning towards the no. But then after listening to you, I thought, you know what, let's do like a small part of this full program and give it a try, like you said, right? Just test it and see if it's indeed a good idea. I think we can't lose anything doing that, and we would definitely win a lot if it turns out well.
Oh, great. Thank you for sharing. Really great to hear that you're going to give that a go. Would love to hear how it goes as well. Keep us
I'd
posted.
love to share it with you, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we are out of time now, so thank you for joining us. We do have a session next week, 16th of July, 1 to 2 p.m. UK time, where you can ask us whatever you want. So it's a Q&A session. Do share your questions beforehand. You'll get some instructions on how to do that in an email. But thank you very much for joining us. Any final words from anyone? Sinead, Zoe, Jen, do you want to chip in?
Just to say a big thank you to everyone for coming, and we look forward to our Ask Us Anything session with you all next week. Please do bring along your questions.
Thank you, Rebecca and Zoe, and especially Rebecca for this great presentation, and for all of our participants who shared their stories. It's been really great to hear from you, and I'm looking forward to the session next week. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.